week had been relentless, blurring flights and deals and builds into one unbroken stretch of forward motion. Miami to secure a house. A Bugatti assembled from nothing, then straight back without so much as a breath between. But through all of it, one problem had sat waiting, untouched by momentum, refusing to be carried along with everything else. The Ferrari 296. It had become something more than a stall project. It was a reminder that not everything yields to effort. Some things resist. Some things push back harder the more force you apply. And this car, more than any of them, had turned into a test of something deeper than patience. It was testing belief. The story behind it was ambitious enough on its own. A car rebuilt from serious damage, carefully reconstructed with real precision and genuine intent. But the ambition hadn't stopped at restoration. A full challenge kit had been added on top of it. Race-spec components never designed to sit on a road car, never meant to coexist with the systems underneath. The engineering was complex, the vision was bold, and the result, after all of it, was painfully simple. The car would not start. Ferrari themselves had been approached early on. Their answer had been clean and final. They would not work on the car in its current state. It needed to be returned to an approved configuration before they would even open a diagnostic laptop near it. That closed the door completely. But then weeks later, a narrow crack of light. A response came back, limited, careful in its wording, but enough to carry a single useful signal. If the car was fully complete, they might consider looking at it. That word carried everything. If, because the car was not complete, not even close. The challenge conversion had demanded a complete reimagining of the front end. Where a standard 296 offered a storage compartment beneath the bonnet, the race version used that space for radiators. Transplanting that philosophy onto a road chassis meant redesigning the entire front structure from scratch. New mounts had to be fabricated. Components had to be repositioned. Systems that were never meant to exist in this form had to be invented on the spot. The radiator sat at the heart of that work. Custom brackets had been built to house a single large central unit, replacing the twin setup from the production car. It was bigger, more aggressive in its proportions, and entirely unproven in this application. The challenge car ran without a hybrid system. This one didn't. That meant more heat to manage, more thermal stress on every surrounding component, and absolutely no guarantee that one radiator could handle what two were originally designed to do. But there was no alternative path. This was the only way through. The installation went smoothly. The radiator dropped into the fabricated mounts with a satisfying precision that suggested the measurements had been right from the start. On either side, the air conditioning condensers were bolted to their own newly built brackets, angled to catch incoming air exactly as intended. From the outside, the front end was beginning to look like something real, something purposeful. Beneath the surface was a different story entirely. The air conditioning system revealed its complexity almost immediately. The original lines were rigid aluminum, shaped and bent to follow a layout that no longer existed. They couldn't be nudged into new positions. They couldn't be persuaded. They had to be cut apart and rebuilt from the ground up. Sections were removed, rerouted, reshaped using a mix of salvaged original pieces and new fabricated material. A conversion kit introduced flexible sections where rigid ones had been, buying some forgiveness in the routing. But even with that flexibility, certain joints refused to cooperate. Some connections would ultimately need to be welded to hold pressure and seal properly over time. For now, the system was only partially assembled, functional enough to exist, but nowhere near finished. And yet, none of that should have been stopping the car from starting, which meant the real problem was somewhere else entirely. Every electronic component had to be connected. That much was certain. Modern Ferraris don't tolerate absence. Every sensor has to report. Every module has to check in. Every signal path has to be complete, or the system simply refuses to engage. Even the front bumper, still sitting off the car and leaning against a wall, had to be electronically present. Its connectors plugged in and accounted for, just to satisfy the startup sequence. Everything that could be connected was connected. The battery was hooked up, and the car responded instantly, though not in the way anyone wanted. Hazard lights started flashing on their own. Warning messages cascaded across the dashboard, one after another, each more urgent than the last. The system demanded the car be plugged into a charger, but when a charger was connected, the car refused the power. It wouldn't accept it. Something deeper in the architecture was blocking the process, holding the door shut from the inside. Attention turned to the hybrid battery. There had been earlier clues pointing in that direction. During previous sessions, someone had noticed that disconnecting the battery's control unit changed the car's behavior entirely. The hazard lights stopped. The warnings went quiet. The system seemed to settle, almost calm, as though a source of confusion had been removed. But the moment the control unit was reconnected, the chaos returned immediately. Every symptom came flooding back. That pattern pointed to something serious. The battery itself might be dead. Not low, not miscalibrated. Dead. In modern hybrid systems, the safety protocols are unforgiving. When a crash occurs, particularly one violent enough to deploy airbags, the high-voltage battery can execute a permanent shutdown. It is a protective measure designed to prevent fire, prevent electrocution, prevent catastrophe. But the protection comes with a consequence that no reset procedure can reverse. The battery has to be replaced. A new unit was sourced, 18,000 pounds. Not the kind of figure that invites casual decision-making. But the logic was clear. Without a functioning hybrid battery, the car would never move under its own power again. Every other repair, every fabricated bracket, every hour of labor would mean nothing if this single component couldn't do its job. The replacement process was careful and deliberate. High-voltage connections were removed one by one, each step treated with the respect that 400 volts demands. Cooling lines were drained and disconnected. Mounting bolts were released in sequence. The dead battery, positioned low behind the cabin, was lowered out slowly and set aside. The new unit went along the same path, seated into position, bolted down and reconnected. Every wire was checked. Every connector is verified. Every cooling line was pressured and inspected. Then the moment arrived again, the one that had failed so many times before. Power was restored. The hazard lights came back. That familiar flash, that stubborn pulse. But this time, something else happened alongside it. Something new. The ignition engaged. It was not dramatic. There was no roar, no sudden burst of life. But the dashboard illuminated fully for the first time. Systems activated in sequence, one after another, each one reporting its presence. The car was awake, genuinely awake, responding in ways it had never responded before. Where there had been a wall, now there was a door, still locked but visible, real. The progress was undeniable. But so were the complications that arrived with it. Error messages appeared across every screen. Battery temperature warnings dominated the display. Alerts referencing thermal runaway flashed in red. The kind of warnings that suggest imminent danger, the kind designed to make technicians step back from the vehicle. Yet, physically, there was nothing wrong. No heat, no smell, no swelling, no sign whatsoever that the battery was doing anything other than sitting quietly in its cradle at ambient temperature. The warnings were ghosts, echoes of a crash that had already happened, burned into the memory of systems that hadn't been told the damage was repaired. Diagnostic equipment was connected, and the readings confirmed what intuition had already suggested. Every fault code traced back to the battery management system. Temperature sensors, specifically, multiple sensors flagging simultaneously, all reporting conditions that did not exist in reality. The wiring was intact. The physical connections were solid. Signals were traveling where they were supposed to travel. The problem was not in the hardware. It was in the software. Attempts were made to go deeper. Transport mode needed to be disabled. Crash flags needed to be cleared. Parameters needed to be reset to convince the car that it was whole again, that the trauma was over, that it was safe to function. But every attempt hit the same wall. Security access required. Manufacturer-level authorization. The kind of access that Ferrari guards closely, that exists behind layers of digital protocol, designed to keep anyone outside their network from reaching the car's deepest systems. Without that key, certain operations simply could not be performed. The car would let you look. It would let you read the codes. But it would not let you change anything that mattered. There were tools on the market that claimed to reach that level. Specialized systems built to interface with restricted manufacturer software. They were expensive, and their success was never guaranteed. Even with the right hardware, the car might still demand a handshake with Ferrari's own servers. A digital nod from Maranello that no aftermarket tool could replicate, which created a situation with no clean exit. Taking the car to Ferrari meant exposing every modification to their scrutiny, every custom bracket, every rerouted wire, every non-standard repair would be examined, documented, and potentially flagged as unacceptable. Components that had been carefully fabricated could be deemed insufficient. Work that had taken weeks could be stripped out in hours and replaced at dealer rates that bear no resemblance to reason. The bill would not be for fixing the battery system. The bill would be for everything they found along the way. And they would find everything. But keeping the car away from Ferrari meant living with a machine that could wake up but not fully function. A car that could illuminate its dash but not fire its engine. A project frozen at the threshold of completion, close enough to see the other side, but unable to step through. For now, the car sat in that exact space. The hazards could be silenced. The ignition could be activated. The total electrical blackout that had defined it for weeks was finally broken. Real, measurable progress had been made, the kind that could be pointed to, that justified the money spent, that proved the theory about the battery had been right all along. But the engine remained silent. That was the line. The one that separated progress from completion, effort from result, almost from done. Every hour invested, every part sourced, every problem solved had moved the car closer. But closer was not there. Closer was still here, still waiting, still incomplete. And so the Ferrari 296 sat exactly where it had been at the start of the week. Change in meaningful ways, improved in ways that mattered, carrying 18,000 pounds worth of new hope under its skin.